Congress never sees this kind of spending porn, does it, until after the fact. Is that correct?
Senator, that's correct.
It's not in our budget. Is that correct?
Senator, that is correct.
But somebody in the administrative state decides that they ought to spend $25 million to study whether a man can breastfeed. Right?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's what I mean by stupid stuff. Do you consider that stupid stuff?
Welcome back to Freedom Forge, the channel where we stand for faith, freedom, common sense, and the constitutional values that made America the greatest nation on earth. If you believe government should answer to taxpayers, if you believe Washington should spend your money responsibly, and if you're tired of watching unelected bureaucrats waste billions while hardworking Americans struggle to make ends meet, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest coverage of the biggest political battles happening in Washington. Today's Senate hearing focused on government spending, federal accountability, inflation, the rising cost of living, and the role of federal agencies in distributing taxpayer dollars. During the hearing, Senator John Kennedy questioned a nominee about outrageous federal spending programs, bureaucratic waste, inflation, and healthcare costs. What followed was one of the clearest examples of the growing divide between ordinary Americans and the administrative state that has become increasingly powerful over the last several decades.
Mr. Duncan, every now and then I see an article that says something like federal government spends $25 million to study whether a man can breastfeed. Or the federal government spends $50 million to try to teach a neighborhood squirrel to code. And I think, how did that stuff get in there? I sit on the Appropriations Committee. We're supposed to put together a budget. Sometimes we do. This year we probably won't, because my friend and colleague, Senator Schumer, wants to shut down the government, to create chaos, to try to get the Graham-Plattner wing of his party to love him. But I digress. That stuff's not in the budget when we vote on the budget. Where's it come from?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question, and you've been a champion on these issues, and I would note your work on the rescissions process, highlighting some of these outrageous spending we've seen in the past. So I think this is why our updates to 2 CFR, which governs grant making across the federal enterprise, is so critical.
Yeah, tell the American people what that is.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity.
Like you're talking to a 10th grader.
Appreciate the opportunity to. So fundamentally, some of the most important things are to ensure that grants are not going to divisive DEI ideologies. They're not going to support illegal immigration. They're not going to support radical gender ideologies. Those are pretty fundamental.
And stupid stuff, right?
And stupid stuff generally, yes, sir. I think the arbiter of ensuring that things do not go to stupid stuff, as you put it, is ultimately a political appointee. One of the president's people that is associated with the administration, appointed by the president, comes in and does a final issuance review before grant dollars go out. That's fundamentally about accountability. It's not intended to usurp peer review or anything like that. It's about making sure that
Let me stop you for a second, Mr. Duncan, because we're going to run out of time. Congress never sees this kind of spending porn, does it, until after the fact. Is that correct?
Senator, that's correct.
It's not in our budget. Is that correct?
Senator, that is correct.
But somebody in the administrative state decides that they ought to spend $25 million to study whether a man can breastfeed. Right?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's what I mean by stupid stuff. Do you consider that stupid stuff?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And what you're going to do at OMB is try to stop the stupid stuff. Try to find out who made that grant and say, no. We're not going to spend money on this. And by the way, if you do it again, you're fired. Is that right? That's what you guys are going to do?
Yes, sir.
It's about time. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, let me ask you one other question. When moms and dads lie down to sleep at night and can't, right now, at this point in time, what's the first thing they're worried about?
I would imagine it would be the ability to support their families.
Yes. Cost of living. Part of that's inflation. Look, I don't, I mean, I remember inflation's very sticky. I remember when it started, it got up 9%. You know, President Trump didn't father this child, but he's got to raise it. Cost of living. Thank you for being straightforward. Now, have you ever gone to let me preface this by saying, I've got two doctors, brothers who are doctors, so I love healthcare providers. But have you ever gone to a healthcare provider and then you get a bill saying you owe us $1,400? And you go, what the hell? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, sir, it actually has.
It's happened to a lot of Americans because the way many of our hospital or healthcare providers bill makes no sense. And so they turn it over to a collection agency, and the collection agency says, look, you pay this $1,400. We can't explain, we won't explain to you how it got here. If we did, we'd have to drown you in the Pacific. But if you don't pay it, we're going to turn it into the credit rating agencies and ruin your credit. Now, why don't, if we want to help the American people, why don't we, at least for a period of time, say healthcare debt is not going to be reported to the rating agencies? It's not, we're not saying you don't have to pay it. We're not saying it's not due. We're not saying you can't be sued. But this debt's being reported to rating agencies when people can't pay it, and then their credit gets ruined, and it makes it even harder for them to live. That's a swell idea, isn't it?
Senator, I think the administration has been very committed to price transparency and ensuring that.
Yeah, but
folks
what
aren't hit
about
with
that
this.
idea?
I'm happy to take that back and determine the administration's position on that matter.
How about it advocating for it?
I'm happy to work with you on this matter, absolutely.
Watching this exchange, one thing became crystal clear. Americans are sick and tired of funding programs that make absolutely no sense while struggling to pay their own bills. Senator Kennedy opened by talking about something that many Americans have experienced. Every few months, another headline appears exposing some bizarre government-funded project. Whether it's millions of dollars spent studying topics that seem completely disconnected from the everyday concerns of taxpayers, or grants that appear to serve ideological agendas instead of practical public needs, Americans are constantly left asking one simple question: who approved this? That's the key issue here. Congress passes budgets. Congress approves spending levels. Yet somehow millions of dollars often find their way into projects that lawmakers themselves never specifically voted on. This is where the administrative state enters the picture. For years, conservatives have warned about the growing power of unelected bureaucracies. While elected representatives face voters every few years, countless federal employees and agency officials make decisions every day that affect the lives of millions of Americans. Many of those decisions happen far away from public scrutiny. Senator Kennedy highlighted this exact concern. His argument was straightforward. If Congress never explicitly approved some of these controversial grants, then who did? The answer, according to the testimony, is that grant programs often move through agency review processes where officials determine how taxpayer money is ultimately distributed. Now, let's be honest. This is exactly why many conservatives have been demanding greater oversight and accountability. The average American doesn't wake up in the morning worried about funding ideological experiments. They worry about paying their mortgage. They worry about grocery prices. They worry about gasoline costs. They worry about whether they can afford health care. Meanwhile, Washington seems obsessed with funding programs that often appear disconnected from those everyday realities. One of the most important moments came when the witness discussed reforms intended to prevent grants from being used for divisive political agendas, radical ideological programs, illegal immigration support efforts, or projects that simply fail to serve taxpayers. Whether you agree with every example mentioned or not, the broader principle resonates with millions of Americans. Taxpayer money should serve taxpayers. That shouldn't be controversial. The federal government collected that money from hardworking citizens who spent long hours at work, operated small businesses, drove trucks, farmed fields, taught classrooms, protected communities, and served in our military. That money does not belong to bureaucrats. It belongs to the American people. And when government officials spend it recklessly, Americans have every right to demand answers. What really stood out during this hearing was the frustration that Senator Kennedy expressed regarding transparency. He pointed out that Congress often learns about controversial spending only after the money has already been distributed. Think about that for a moment. The people elected by voters frequently don't discover questionable expenditures until long after the decision has already been made. That's not accountability. That's bureaucracy operating with minimal oversight. This is exactly why many conservatives support reforms that return more power to elected officials and reduce the influence of unelected administrative agencies. The hearing then shifted toward what may be the most important issue facing American families today: inflation and the cost of living. This is where the conversation became especially relevant. Kennedy asked a simple question: what keeps parents awake at night? The answer wasn't complicated. It's the cost of living. And that's exactly right. Across America, families are feeling pressure from every direction. Groceries cost more. Housing costs more. Insurance costs more. Utilities cost more. Transportation costs more. Even basic necessities that people once took for granted have become significantly more expensive. For many Americans, their paycheck simply doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Now, conservatives have argued for years that reckless government spending contributes to inflationary pressures. When Washington spends trillions of dollars it doesn't have, eventually somebody pays the price. And that price often arrives in the form of higher costs for ordinary citizens. The witness acknowledged that inflation remains a major concern. That's important because this isn't a partisan issue anymore. Americans feel it every time they walk into a grocery store. They feel it every time they pay rent. They feel it every time they fill up their gas tank. The hearing also touched on another issue that affects millions of families: healthcare debt. This part of the conversation deserves attention because it highlights a problem that many Americans have personally experienced. You go to a hospital. You receive treatment. Weeks later, a bill arrives. The charges are confusing. The explanations are unclear. The costs seem impossible to understand. Then, if payment becomes difficult, collection agencies become involved and credit scores are threatened. Kennedy raised an interesting proposal. Why should medical debt automatically damage someone's credit rating? After all, most people don't choose to get sick. Most people don't plan for medical emergencies. And in many cases, patients struggle to understand how they were billed in the first place. Regardless of where someone falls politically, this is a discussion worth having. Healthcare transparency is one of those rare issues where Americans across the political spectrum often agree that the system needs improvement. What makes this entire hearing so significant is that it reflects a broader debate about the future of government itself. Should federal agencies continue operating with broad discretion over taxpayer funds? Should Congress have stronger oversight powers? Should Americans receive greater transparency regarding where their money goes? Should bureaucrats be held accountable for spending decisions? These are not minor questions. These are fundamental questions about representative government. From a conservative perspective, the answer is clear. Government exists to serve the people, not the other way around. Taxpayer dollars should be spent carefully. Federal agencies should operate transparently. Bureaucrats should be accountable. And every dollar wasted on ideological projects or unnecessary programs is a dollar that could have remained in the pockets of hardworking American families. At a time when inflation continues to strain household budgets, when families are struggling to afford basic necessities, and when the national debt continues to climb, Americans are demanding common sense. They want accountability. They want transparency. And most importantly, they want a government that focuses on their priorities instead of the priorities of Washington insiders. This hearing showed that those concerns are finally being voiced loudly and clearly in the halls of Congress. The real question now is whether Washington will actually listen. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more coverage of the biggest hearings, political confrontations, and battles over government accountability, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Congress should have greater oversight over federal grant spending? Do you believe medical debt should affect credit scores? And should bureaucrats be held personally accountable for wasteful spending decisions? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching Freedom Forge, and we'll see you in the next video.